Today, we travel from the first humans in Africa to artificial intelligence in the 2020s. And one question keeps returning. What are people trying to get a grip on here, and what does it cost? We begin around 300,000 BC in Africa. This is where modern humans appear, Homo sapiens. These early humans are vulnerable. No claws, no armor, no incredible speed. But they have something else: cooperation and imagination. This is where humans first try to get a grip on survival, on cold, on predators, on hunger, and most of all, on tomorrow. Between roughly 70,000 and 10,000 BC, humans spread from Africa across the world to Europe, Asia, Australia, and later the Americas. It happens slowly, generation after generation. Small groups move on. Humans become world travelers before they even know what the world is. Around 10,000 BC, something enormous happens. Humans begin farming. They plant grain, keep animals, and settle in one place. Because if you stay, you get villages. If you get villages, you get property. If you get property, you get rules. And if you get rules, someone will eventually say, "I'll keep track of that." Here, humans try to get a grip on food, to be less dependent on chance. But the price is new dependence on harvests, land, property, and power. Farming gives humans roots, but also new worries. Around 3000 BC, the first major cities and writing systems appear, especially in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Writing does not begin with novels, love letters, or deep poetry. No. It often begins with administration. How much grain is there? Who has paid? Who still has to deliver? Still, this is revolutionary. Writing gives societies a memory outside the human head. You can preserve agreements, record laws, organize trade. Humans get a grip on memory, property, and government. Around 2600 BC, the pyramids of Giza are built. And yes, they are big, very big. But the impressive part is not just the stone. The impressive part is the organization behind it. You need food supply, planning, workers, knowledge, religion, government, and a ruler. Here, humans try to get a grip on death, power, and eternity. Remember, the pyramid is not just stone, but organized power. Between 1200 and 500 BC, iron spreads, and that changes a lot. Iron makes better tools possible, better plows, better weapons. Farmers can produce more, armies become stronger, empires can grow. That is typical history. One invention helps humans eat better and fight better. Here, humans try to get a grip on land, production, and security. But the price is that power becomes harder, literally. Remember, iron makes fields stronger and war more dangerous. Between 800 and 300 BC, something special happens. In Greece, India, and China, major ideas emerge that still influence us today. Socrates and Plato think about truth, government, and justice. Confucius thinks about order, behavior, and society. Buddha thinks about suffering, desire, and liberation. Humans are no longer only asking, how do we survive? They are also asking, how should we live? That is a huge step. Humans try to get a grip on meaning, on behavior, on the chaos inside the mind and inside society. Remember, civilization is not only building with stone, but also thinking about how to live together. From 27 BC to 476 AD, the Roman Empire grows into one of the most influential empires in history. Rome builds roads, aqueducts, cities, and a vast system of government. And roads here are more than roads. They are lines of power. Soldiers can move faster. Trade can move faster. Messages can travel farther. Rome tries to get a grip on space, on territories, on peoples, on order. But order has a darker side too. Rome brings law and infrastructure, but also slavery, conquest, and violence. Remember, Rome shows that order and power often walk hand in hand. From the 4th century, Christianity spreads strongly, first within and around the Roman Empire, and later far beyond it. Religion here is not only personal, it becomes culture, art, government, calendar, education, and identity. Churches become places of faith, but also of power and community. Humans try to get a grip on death, suffering, and meaning. Also the question, why are we here? Remember, religion gives meaning, but also becomes a force in power and society. In the 7th century, Islam emerges on the Arabian Peninsula. It then spreads quickly across large parts of the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. The Islamic world becomes important for trade, science, urban life, philosophy, and art. Think of trade routes, libraries, calligraphy, markets, and cities where knowledge from different cultures comes together. Here too, humans try to get a grip on meaning, order, and community. And at the same time, religion connects enormous regions. Remember, Islam becomes a global force in faith, knowledge, trade, and culture. Between 600 and 1400, great empires and civilizations flourish across the world. Tang and Song China, the Mali Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Khmer Empire, Islamic caliphates. In China, cities and inventions grow. In West Africa, gold trade and centers of learning flourish. In Southeast Asia, temple complexes rise. Everywhere, humans try to get a grip on power, trade, water, faith, and government. Remember, world history has never had just one center. Between 1096 and 1291, the Crusades take place. European Christian armies move toward the eastern Mediterranean, especially around Jerusalem. They are religious wars, but also political and economic events. There is faith, power, trade, honor, fear, and of course, a lot of violence. Here, humans try to get a grip on holy places, identity, and power. But what emerges is long-lasting tension between worlds that could also have met through trade and knowledge. Remember, when worlds meet, peace is not guaranteed. From 1206, the Mongol Empire grows into the largest continuous land empire in history. Mongol horsemen move across enormous territories. Cities fall, empires disappear. But at the same time, trade routes between East and West become more connected. That is the double nature of history. The Mongol Empire brings destruction and connection, fear and remember. Connection can open roads, but it can also bring armies. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death sweeps through Europe, Asia, and North Africa. A pandemic kills enormous numbers of people. Villages empty, cities lose inhabitants, labor becomes scarce, societies are shaken. And here we see something painful. Connection makes a world richer, but also more vulnerable. Trade routes bring silk, spices, and ideas, but they can also bring disease. Remember, the more connected the world becomes, the faster disasters can travel. Around 1450, Gutenberg develops movable type printing in Europe. Books can now be produced much faster. Ideas travel faster. Knowledge becomes less dependent on monasteries, scribes, and wealthy patrons. One text can suddenly reach thousands of people. Between roughly 1450 and 1750, witch persecutions take place in Europe. People are accused of witchcraft, often women, not always, but often. Behind these accusations are fear, religion, superstition, social tension, and sometimes just neighbor disputes that spiral completely out of control. A failed harvest, a sick child, a dead cow, and someone has to be blamed. Remember, when fear gains power, being different becomes dangerous. In 1492, Columbus reaches the Americas. This is often called a discovery, but that word is complicated. Because for the people already living there, America did not need to be discovered. They were already there. What is true is this: from this moment, Europe and the Americas become intensely connected. Crops, animals, silver, people, ideas, and diseases cross the ocean. For European powers, this means wealth and expansion. For many indigenous societies, it means disease, violence, loss of land, and destruction. Remember, 1492 connects worlds, but in a deeply unequal way. In the 15th to 17th centuries, major European seafaring and colonial expansion begin. Spain and Portugal lead first. Later, the Netherlands, England, and France follow. Ships connect oceans. Trade routes run around Africa, across the Atlantic, and toward Asia. Spices, sugar, silver, gold, cotton, and people become part of global trade. Colonial expansion also means violence, slavery, coercion, and domination. Here, Europe tries to get a grip on world trade, and it succeeds, but at an enormous human cost. Remember, global trade grows, but often on unequal terms. Between 1568 and 1648, the Dutch provinces revolt against Spanish rule. This becomes the 80 Years' War. It is about taxation, religion, power, and self-government. Eventually, the Dutch Republic emerges. That is unusual in a Europe full of kings and princes. Not a modern democracy like today, certainly not. But it is a distinct political system in which cities, provinces, and regions gain major influence. Remember, the Netherlands is born from a struggle over power, faith, and self-rule. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, is founded. It is a company with ships, forts, soldiers, trade monopolies, and colonial power, a multinational with cannons. The VOC turns the Netherlands into a global trading power, but that trade is tied to coercion, violence, and exploitation in Asia. The Netherlands tries to get a grip on world trade, and at the same time shows how thin the line can be between trade and domination. Remember, the VOC shows that trade and power sometimes sail on the same ship. In 1776, the American colonies declare independence from Great Britain. The American Revolution brings big words: freedom, rights, republic, self-government. The idea that power does not automatically belong to a king gains global influence. Freedom does not apply to everyone. Enslaved people and indigenous peoples are largely excluded from those beautiful ideals. Humans try to get a grip on political freedom. But historically, freedom is often handed out selectively. In 1789, the French Revolution breaks out. The Bastille is stormed. The king loses his automatic authority. Citizens demand liberty, equality, and citizenship. But the revolution also brings chaos, terror, and the guillotine. Ideals can lift people up, but they can also drag them along. Here, humans try to get a grip on power from below. Not the king at the center, but the citizen. Remember, the French Revolution turns citizens into main characters of history. Between roughly 1760 and 1850, the Industrial Revolution transforms daily life. Machines, factories, steam power, and railways shift the world into a higher gear. People move to cities. Work is organized by the clock. No longer does the sun set the rhythm. The factory does. Humans try to get a grip on production. Make more, make faster, make cheaper. But the price is high. Poor working conditions, child labor, pollution, and new inequality. Remember, industry gives humans power, but also puts them on the clock. Between 1800 and 1914, European powers dominate large parts of Africa and Asia. On maps, territories change color, as if the world is a board game, except real people live on that board. Imperialism is about resources, power, trade, prestige, and control, often wrapped in words like civilization and progress. But in practice, it often means oppression, violence, forced labor, and extraction. Europe tries to get a grip on the world, but for many colonized societies, that means losing their grip. Remember, imperialism connects the world through power and inequality. In 1914, the First World War begins. Europe is a powder keg of alliances, nationalism, weapons, and distrust. One assassination in Sarajevo becomes the spark, but the powder was already there. What follows is industrial mass slaughter: trenches, mud, gas masks, artillery, barbed wire, machine guns. War is now not only courage and strategy, but also factory, steel, and logistics. Humans try to get a grip on power between states, but lose grip on the destruction they themselves have organized. Remember, the First World War shows what industry does when it becomes war. In 1917, the Russian Tsarist Empire collapses. War, poverty, and unrest bring revolution. Eventually, the Soviet Union emerges, a state built around communist ideals. The idea is that workers and peasants should get a grip on their own future. No czar, no old elite, no exploitation. But in practice, an authoritarian system grows, with one party, control, repression, and later terror. Remember, ideology can give hope, but also build new control. In 1929, the stock market crashes in New York. What begins as financial panic becomes a global economic crisis. Banks collapse, businesses close, unemployment rises, families lose income, homes, and security. Humans try to get a grip on the economy, but the economy turns out to be a system that can drag people along. Remember, when the economy is globally connected, uncertainty travels with it. In 1939, the Second World War begins. Nazi Germany invades Poland. The conflict then grows into a world war. Europe, North Africa, Asia, and the Pacific become involved. This is the most destructive conflict in history. Tanks, bombings, occupation, resistance, collaboration, total war. And at its center stands the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews, and the persecution and murder of Roma, disabled people, political opponents, homosexuals, and others. Remember, the Second World War shows how dangerous ideology, industry, and state power can become together. In August 1945, the United States uses atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For the first time, humans have a weapon that can destroy a city in a single strike. The war with Japan ends shortly afterward, but the world has crossed a line. Humans try to get a grip on war through ultimate destructive power, but this creates a new problem. From now on, humanity can threaten itself on a global scale. Science becomes power, and power becomes existential danger. Remember, from 1945 onward, humans can destroy themselves on a global scale. After 1945, the world is not calm. It is divided. On one side are the United States and its allies. On the other side, the Soviet Union and its allies. Capitalism versus communism, blue versus red. And in between, the rest of the world, often not exactly by choice. The Cold War is cold because the superpowers do not attack each other directly, but through espionage, propaganda, missiles, threats, and proxy wars. In 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is adopted. After the Second World War and the Holocaust, the world wants to state clearly, there are rights that belong to every human being. Not because you are rich, not because you come from a certain country, but because you are human. That does not solve everything. Paper does not stop a dictator if no one acts, but it does provide a measuring stick, a language to name injustice. Remember, human rights give the world a measuring stick, even when countries often fall short of it. After 1945, decolonization begins. Especially between 1949 and the 1970s, many countries in Asia and Africa become independent. Colonial empires fall apart. New flags are raised. Leaders address crowds. There is hope, pride, and liberation. But independence is not a magic switch. Borders were often drawn by colonial powers. Economies were structured unequally, and sometimes violence, civil war, or dictatorship follows. Humans try to get a grip on self-determination after centuries of domination. Remember, independence changes the map, but not immediately all power relations. In 1953, the Netherlands is struck by the North Sea flood disaster. During the night of January 31st to February 1st, dikes break in Zeeland, South Holland, and West Brabant. Villages flood. People flee to attics and rooftops. Streets become rivers. The Netherlands has tried for centuries to get a grip on water, but this disaster shows that water remains an opponent you should never underestimate. After the flood disaster comes the Dutch answer, the Delta Works. Built roughly between 1958 and 1997, dams, sluices, storm surge barriers, dikes, concrete, steel, and hydraulic engineering. The Delta Works show how a country turns vulnerability into technology, first almost drowning, then building something engineers from around the world come to study. In 1969, humans set foot on the moon. Neil Armstrong steps out of the lunar module and speaks words that become world history. But behind that one moment is enormous technology. Rockets, computers, calculations, training, risk, and a solid amount of Cold War prestige. Humans try to get a grip on space. Not just land or sea anymore, but the universe. Remember, on the moon, humans truly see how small Earth is. In 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. For decades, that wall was the symbol of the Cold War. East and West, control and freedom. Families and friends separated by concrete, barbed wire, and watchtowers. They chip away pieces of concrete. They cry, laugh, climb, sing. A world order begins to visibly break apart. Remember, even concrete falls when the story behind it collapses. From the 1990s, and especially in the 2000s, the internet transforms daily life. First, there is the screeching modem. Then come email, websites, search engines, social media, and smartphones. Information becomes instant. Communication becomes global. Work, news, friendship, trade, and entertainment move into digital networks. Humans try to get a grip on distance and information. But at the same time, they become dependent on platforms, data, and screens. Remember, the internet makes connection every day, but dependence too. On September 11, 2001, the United States is struck by terrorist attacks. The images travel live around the world. People watch history turn on television. The shock is global. Afterward comes the war on terror. Wars, security measures, debates about privacy, religion, radicalization, and international power. Remember, in a connected world, one attack can have consequences everywhere. In 2020, the world faces COVID-19. A virus spreads through a hyper-connected world. Air travel, cities, work, trade, and family contact suddenly become routes of infection. The streets are empty. Masks appear. Hospitals come under pressure. Kitchen tables become offices, classrooms, and meeting rooms at the same time. Remember, COVID shows that global connection also means global vulnerability. And then we reach the 2020s, the breakthrough of artificial intelligence. AI already existed, but now it suddenly lands on the desks of millions of people. Text, images, code, music, video, analysis. Machines begin doing tasks that once seemed typically human. Humans try to get a grip on complexity, on knowledge, on speed. But the question now becomes, who has a grip on the systems themselves? Remember, AI may ask the newest historical question. If machines become smarter, where do humans need to become wiser? And now we have reached the end of this journey through time. And maybe there is one final thought to add. After everything we have seen, from the first humans around a fire, to cities, empires, revolutions, wars, the internet, and AI, one pattern keeps coming back. Humans are always trying to get a grip on nature, on hunger, on power, on each other, and often on their own uncertainty. But when uncertainty is not understood, it can turn into something else, into control, into status, into cynicism, into blame, into groups fighting groups, men against women, left against right, strong against weak, us against them. And that is not new. The technology is new. The platforms are new. The algorithms are new. The podcast microphones are definitely new. But the mechanism underneath is very old. When people feel powerless, they often look for power. When people feel unseen, they often look for status. When people feel pain, they often look for someone to blame. And when people feel lost, they often look for a simple story, even if that story is wrong. So maybe the real lesson is not that history makes us better automatically. It does not. History gives us tools, but it does not guarantee wisdom. A healthy society is not built by men winning from women, or women winning from men, or one group humiliating another group. It is built by people learning something much harder: strength without cruelty, freedom without selfishness, humor without dehumanizing, boundaries without hatred, confidence without superiority, and vulnerability without shame. Maybe that is what adulthood really means, not only for one person, but for a civilization. Because the old struggle is still here. Not men against women, not young against old, not one side against the other, but maturity against primitive status games. And honestly, those primitive status games currently have an excellent marketing department. So if this journey through world history shows us anything, it is this. We have become very good at building powerful systems. Cities, empires, factories, media, networks, artificial intelligence. But the real question is still the oldest one. Can we become wise enough to handle what we have built? That perhaps is the next chapter of history. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked it.